Program Design Part 2. So the first thing that we need to look at is multi-joint versus single joint movements, because when designing a workout program, it's really important to understand the distinction between a compound and an isolation exercise. So typically speaking, compounds or multi-joint movements are key for accumulating volume and stimulus across several muscle groups. So they are excellent for load progressions. Although they do provide a less precise stimulus to individual muscles, and they do induce greater systemic fatigue, their complexity but also the effectiveness in driving overall growth mean they should form a core part of your resistance training program and be progressed over the long term. Now, compound exercises also require a greater learning curve. They are very skillful movements, but are invaluable for comprehensive strength development. If we actually compare this to isolation or single joint exercises which focus on the stimulus directly of that target muscle, it results in less systemic fatigue and lower overall growth potential. However, they are advantageous for precise rep and set progressions. They do require less learning, making them suitable for targeting specific areas based on your emphasis. And I strongly believe that both multi-joint and single joint movements or compound versus isolation exercises have their place within a resistance training program. Examples do include, which we can see on the right, the barbell back squat. That's a multi-joint exercises. There we've got your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, all of which are targeted. Whereas compare that to a knee extension, we've got your quadricep muscles being targeted in that shortened range, and the antagonist, which is the muscle which is relaxed, is going to be your hamstring as well. So next we need to look at exercise order, because when structuring your workout, the order of your exercises significantly impacts how effective they become. And also, we could argue that energy availability is going to be crucial throughout your workout. So I would recommend, if you are a beginner, begin with multi-joint lifts. These are exercises which are most demanding and technical. They do require the highest output and performance to maximize stimulus. And when we actually prioritize those movements first, you can execute them with the greatest energy and focus, enhancing the overall effectiveness in building overall strength and development. Now, within this framework, free weight multi-joint exercises do actually take over machine-based multi-joint movements, which are then followed by single joint exercises. For example, you might start with a dumbbell press and then move into a machine chest press, and then finish off with a pec fly. Now, the placement of the single joint exercise can vary. Performing them first is a strategy which I sometimes use in my training, known as pre-fatigue, or perhaps a primer movement, just to target that specific muscle group and drive as much blood in there as we can before our main multi-joint lift. Now again, that can create local and central fatigue, potentially limiting the effectiveness of the next lift. However, this approach might reduce the number of stimulating reps when the target muscle is the prime mover in the following multi-joint exercise. For example, a leg extension before a leg press. However, pre-fatigue is better utilized for low fatigue activation or warm-up sets rather than for main working sets. If a multi-joint lift isn't adequately targeting the intended muscle, pre-fatigue is not the solution. Instead, a more suitable multi-joint exercise needs to be prescribed. And again, exercises that give us more stability allow us to create more force and recruit more contractile units, which give us the best chance of building muscle and improving our overall strength, comparing a barbell back squat versus a hack squat. However, pre-fatigue can actually be useful if your target body part is significantly weaker, and it won't compromise the performance of the multi-joint lift planned for that session. So you might go into your leg sessions by doing a laying or a seated hamstring curl just to get your knees warm before you then move into that main multi-joint lift, whether it's a barbell back squat, a hack squat, a pendulum squat, a leg press, whatever is programmed for you. Now, agonist and antagonistic muscle groups play a critical role in optimizing your workouts. Above all, we want to prioritize exercises that maximize loading and address your weaknesses first, rotating them in to maintain this focus throughout your program. So, looking at an upper body workout, there are several effective ways to structure that routine. You might do push, push, pull, pull. This method allows you to focus on one type of movement at a time, ensuring that you can load each exercise heavily without immediate fatigue from the alternating muscle group. For example, you might start with a bench press and a shoulder press, both of which are push, followed by a row and a lat pull down, which is pull. Again, you might try an alternative, which is push, pull, push, pull. We alternate between pushing and pulling exercises, which can help to manage fatigue more evenly across your workout, allowing for one muscle group to recover while the work is targeted on the opposite group. An example of this could be a bench press, which is push, followed by a row, which is pull, then a shoulder press, which is push, and then finishing off with a lat pull down, which is pull. And this is important for energy availability as well, but also what you need to improve on your physique, whether it is your anterior or your posterior. Finally, the third alternative could be pull, pull, push, push. You might need to bring up your posterior, similar to the first structure, but reversed. This approach allows you to focus on pulling movements first, which might be beneficial if your back muscles are the priority. We start with a row and then a lat pull down, then we move towards the bench press and a shoulder press. Now, each of these structures do have its own benefit, and the best choice actually depends on your unique goals, but also weaknesses. For instance, if pressing strength is a priority, we want to begin with push movements. That might be most effective. However, if managing fatigue and maintaining a balanced muscle activation is going to be crucial, you might want to alternate between movements. So push, pull, push, pull. Rotate these structures as needed to continually challenge yourself and also to be able to target your specific muscle groups. We've then got a weekly exercise order. So it's crucial to manage both localized and systemic fatigue to ensure optimal recovery and progress training. So we will actually want to target a muscle group 2 to 3 times per week. That can actually lead to overlapping fatigue and recovery issues, especially if you are an advanced lifter. For example, performing deadlifts on a pull day, that can systemically fatigue the erector spinae, potentially impairing your performance on squats during a subsequent day. So it is really important to actually work out when these exercises are placed within your resistance training program and also on what day. So a solution to this issue might be to adjust your exercise selection, doing deadlifts on pull day and then opting for leg press on leg day, which reduces the load on the erectors and allows for better recovery. Managing systemic fatigue and stimulus is going to be so important, especially when you're looking at high volume or high effort sessions, which do create substantial recovery debts and central nervous system fatigue. To actually balance this, we want to program lower volume and lower effort sessions between these intense workouts. So you might have a strength day, you also might have a hypertrophy day. different volumes, different rep ranges. This approach helps to maintain overall training intensity while allowing adequate recovery. To actually ensure your program is well balanced, we also want to consider these questions. Is your target muscle of that day weaker? We also want to prioritize exercises that address your weakness first. They're going to require the most energy and focus. Number 2, is the target muscle still very sore? So if you've got a muscle group which is sore from the previous session, it might be that they need more recovery. So adjust your training intensity or volume accordingly. And then number 3, is your fatigue level high? High overall fatigue levels can actually impair your performance and increase the risk of injury or illness. So on days when fatigue is high, opt for a lighter session, higher rep schemes, or active recovery to ensure you maintain your progress without overtraining. Looking at exercise variety, it's almost like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Or is it just right? We actually want to strike the right balance. That's going to be essential because too much variety can be counterproductive for hypertrophy, as unfamiliar movements might not stimulate muscles effectively due to lack of skill acquisition and difficulty in tracking progression. Too little variety could actually lead to repetitive movement injuries and actually significantly reduce your strength outcomes, incomplete muscle development, whilst also making your workouts a little bit less enjoyable if you're doing the same movements week after week after week. Now, we want to incorporate a variety into your routine. That's going to add several benefits, such as improved strength and outcomes, more uniform hypertrophy, and reduced repetitive movement injuries. So to actually optimize your program, we want to prioritize progressing lifts, also multi-joint exercises, which should remain consistent if they're showing progress. Single joint exercises, they can be rotated more frequently to introduce some variety without compromising your main lifts. If you are an advanced lifter, you may benefit from a workout rotation such as an A, a B, and a C rotation, which do provide more time between specific workouts, allowing for adequate recovery and continued overload. And this method actually ensures that you can push for progression in key lifts while still incorporating enough variety to prevent injuries and maintain overall muscle development and enjoyment. Finally, looking at exercise stimulus. When we actually discuss exercise stimulus, the mind-muscle connection plays a crucial role. Internal cueing is particularly effective for beginners as it helps with learning proper motor patterns, enhancing the activation of antagonistic and synergistic muscles, and thereby improving your stability and your control. While the external movement may appear correct, internal compensation can actually occur, meaning the target muscle might not be adequately stimulated. So a simple application of this concept is to assess whether you actually feel the target muscle working during an exercise. Weaker body parts often compensate by recruiting other muscles, which can actually detract from the effectiveness of that exercise. However, looking at the mind-muscle connection again, it has potential for beginners than advanced lifters. It can limit progressive overload, especially for seasoned lifters. If you're just focusing solely on the feeling, the muscle itself might not provide the necessary stimulus for the continued growth and strength gains. And we saw this with a single arm lat pull down and how significant the load was reduced based on these advanced lifters compared to actually using a heavier load. The form was slightly off and they saw increased strength gains and also hypertrophy gains. Lifting tempo is also important. We want to control your eccentric phase. That's the lengthening of a muscle. That does last 2 to 3 seconds, increasing time under tension, but requires less load and volume, which might not align with your goal of maximizing hypertrophy and strength, but it definitely is needed to build muscle. Although slow eccentrics use less energy and force, they are beneficial for muscle control and technique refinement. Research shows that your ability to actually stimulate muscle hypertrophy in that lengthened range is significantly greater than in the shortened range. So we want to spend enough time lengthening that muscle. In order to do that, 2 to 3 seconds, controlling the eccentric and even training the muscle at partial lengths can be very, very important. Now, the isometric phase should be brief, 0 to 1 seconds for safety, with no pause generally being the best approach to maintain momentum and muscle engagement. That concentric phase, again, should be controlled, lasts 1 or 2 seconds. It requires more energy and force development, crucial for building your strength and also your muscle. If we were to summarize this, both mind-muscle connection and lifting tempo is going to be vital components for exercise stimulus. Beginners are going to benefit greatly from focusing on mind-muscle connection, technique, and muscle activation, while advanced lifters should prioritize progressive overload. A balanced approach to lifting tempo, controlled eccentrics and concentrics, can help to maximize your muscle growth and strength development.